mashpia, that's chapter number 1. Remember the mashpia? His whole point of hashpa, it's not just to share information. He wants to teach us. Okay, and that's the objective. Teaching is the miskabel b'makabel, that it will be accepted for us. Yeah, like he measures our kelim and he gives us just the right amount of information that we need to know in order to process this piece. Okay, so his intention is not to let us know everything what he knows about it. You know what would happen to us? He would smash us completely. And he has no intention of doing it, right? His intention is to build us. Okay, and building, he puts one brick at a time. He's not just going to overwhelm us where we're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is complicated, and walk away from it. It's like, no, I want to, build them slowly, one by one, detail by detail. And a lot of times we will notice that he will come back to the same idea, but would add 2 extra cents. And then you're like, why couldn't you do it for the first time? But that's just how it is. Like, why couldn't he just tell us the first time everything what we know? But it doesn't work like that, because he wants to give us rochav and go deeper. So he will expand us and then go slightly deeper. It's like, imagine you're carving a spiral in a wood. You can't just go zooming deep. You want to expand, and then you go a little bit deeper. You want to expand and then go a little bit deeper, right? Imagine you are digging a well. Right? You can't just dig a well. You have to go wider and then deeper, wider and then deeper. So that's what he does. He gives us a piece of information, then gives us a few extra details for rochav, and then goes a little bit deeper when he comes back to it. And then a little bit, and you'll see that he's repetitively doing it. So he'll come back to the same discussion, but add 2 details or 3 details. And be like, oh, but we only could go, if we went through that circle with him.
So actually, in this chapter, he does that quite a bit with the Shema, where in a few different paragraphs he shows us some details of the Shema that we didn't really deal with in chapter 1. And you could say, well, okay, in this paragraph he deals with it, and then he goes back and gives you more details. So exactly what Mila is describing. Okay, so let's start, and this is our format until we see that we need another format. It seems like this is what we're doing. I'm going to just go through our short summaries to bring us up to speed about what we've been learning in chapter 3. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms, and you're going to get together and look at the paragraph that we did last week. You're going to discuss it and come up with a 3-line, 4-line summary. So let's have a look what we've done so far. And we just really...
Just tell us which paragraph that is, 3, 4, or 5. You just said before we start.
It's going to be paragraph 5, because you'll see here, we've done... Last week we looked at paragraph 5, so that's what you're going to do in the breakout rooms. But let's look, what is the thread so far? What has he told us so far in this chapter? So I'm just going to read 2. Paragraph 1, he introduced to us the idea of 2 worlds. There are 2 worlds, the concealed world of Atzilus and the revealed worlds of Bria. And his bonus begins with Yechuda tata'a, which is unifying the created beings with Malchus of Atzilus. In other words, unifying Bria with Atzilus. And this is done through his bonus on the Devar Hashem that flows from Malchus of Atzilus to the worlds of Bria, the created beings mi'ayin liyesh. Might sound a little bit complicated, but it's not really. He shows us later that what we're talking about is making the yichud of what's equivalent of Bina to Chochmah. And this is what he describes in paragraph 2, says, okay, what is Yechuda tata'a? And he makes this analogy between the eon into a concept that we learned in chapter 1 with eon into Elokis. Okay, here we go. When I do eon into a concept, I analyze the letters I heard from my teacher to search for the inner dimension, the oimek hamusag. And similarly, when I do eon into the created beings, I analyze their letter combinations to sense their bitul to their source in Malchus of Atzilus. And that's Yechuda tata'a. Yechuda Ila'a is when I do eon into a concept. The eon connects me to the oimek hamusag, which is the oimek of Bina. This connection is hamakas hadas, which enables me to sense the essence of the concept, in other words, the chokhmah. So he's drawing an analogy between something that we already know from chapter 1 with when I do eon into Elokus, I come to the level of seeing, i.e. chokhmah, how the 10 spheros of Atzilus are united with their source in the Matzil. Okay. Then in paragraph 3, Reb Hillel describes how each detail of the Shema prayer, including Baruch Shem and the first paragraph beginning V'hafta, map onto the process of Hispununus into a concept that we learned in chapter 1 and 2. So there you would have to look in detail how the Shema prayer corresponds to the process that we learned in chapter 1 and 2. Our purpose in life is this is paragraph 4, and this is what you guys came up with. Our purpose in life is to express the one mitzvah to know Hashem. We begin with bringing the knowledge into Pnimius, which allows us to be able to see and feel this with the eyes of our seichel, to know that Hashem is the same down here as he is above. So this was talking about Memalei Kol Almin, that the energy of Hashem filling the world is the same above as it is below. In other words, Hashem doesn't change. Okay, I wonder if this feels familiar, or if we suddenly go like, oh, what was that about? But really, if you just take the time, you can read you can just read through the English and see that this is just a thread of really he's connecting what we learned in chapter 1 with the idea of Hisbonenus into Elokus. And it sounds, I don't know, here it doesn't, for some reason it doesn't sound so simple, but in many ways it is simple because he's telling us that what we learned in chapter 1 and 2 really is the same process that that you use in order to do eon into Hashem. And this is what he shows us in these first few paragraphs. Now, paragraph 5, which is what we learned last week, is, let's see, we're going to break you up into groups.
Are you posting paragraph 5?
Well, everything is posted on the WhatsApp group. If you look previously, what happens is people write on the WhatsApp group after I post things. So it is there, it is on the WhatsApp group. It might not be the last thing that was posted, but it is there.
But I can't get 2 screens at once. I mean, if I'm in a breakout room, I don't know how to, anyway.
So I always post it a few days before. So if you look at the WhatsApp group, you should be able to download it and print it out, because it's what we're doing now is
behind. I'm asking a practical question for right now. I can't do 2 days ago.
It's on the WhatsApp group, and it's always on the WhatsApp group, like at least on Friday or Thursday. And it's always the same document. We're just adding to the same document.
Okay. Can I ask a relevant question about the summary of paragraph 2?
Yes.
what is meant by eon into creative beings
Okay.
as opposed to a concept?
So that was the created beings is the world of Bria, meaning the beings that are created mi'ayin leyesh.
But for me, I mean, that's still, practically speaking, for me, that's still a concept. I mean, when I think about doing eon
So
into
we have-
creative beings, if I'm doing eon on an animal or a person or a plant, so how do we do eon on creative beings as opposed to a concept?
So right now, it's a good question, but right now he's just giving it to us as a general idea that is what the process of Yechuda tata'a would be, that you do eon into the physical created reality. And how do you do it? By analyzing their letter combinations. In other words, the Devar Hashem, which gives them life. And the source of this Devar Hashem, he described in paragraph 1, flows from Malchus of Atzilus. So you're analyzing these letter combinations to sense how they are betul to their source in Malchus of Atzilus. In other words, Hashem spoke the world into being, and these are the letters that animate all of creation, the world that was created mi'ayin leyesh. And we begin with Yechuda tata'a, which is that you analyze these letters in a similar way to what we did when we did eon into a concept, where we analyzed the letters of the teacher. So he's just drawing an analogy, saying it's a similar process. There we analyze the letters, the words that we heard from our teacher. And here when you do that, you would be analyzing the letter combinations of the Devar Hashem that brings the worlds into being. How to do it? He hasn't, he's just giving this to us as a concept.
Okay, so this is all still theoretical.
It's still theoretical, but as we go deeper into this chapter, he is going to be taking us through this process of Yechuda tata'a and maybe Yechuda Ila'a as well. And that's why he keeps talking about these. We'll see today when we look at paragraph 6, they form a shalim for how the energy of Hashem enlivens the created beings. And we're going to do the eon. So he's going to teach us. But here, this is exactly, it wasn't on the recording, but this is exactly Saratova's question. Like sometimes we have to understand that he's giving us a klal. He's giving us a general idea, and only later will he give us the details. So yes, we have a question. It's good that you have a question because it means you understand that, oh, I want to do this, but he's not telling me how. You can't tell us how yet, because first you have to go klal, prat, klal. You have to see the big picture, like the general rules, and then you go into the details, and then you pull out and put it back into the big picture. It's kind of like, doing a puzzle. You look at the picture on the puzzle box to see what it's supposed to be. Then you go into all the little pieces and try to put it together. And then hopefully you come back out and it's you see the whole picture. This is actually, he describes this later in one of the other chapters. I don't remember which, that's how you learn. You have to have the big picture, go into the details, and then pull out into the big picture. And sometimes it's hard to know whether you're in the klal or in the prat. But here he's giving us a klal, like a general picture. What is Yechuda tata'a? What is Yechuda Ila'a? And then he's going to go into details, really starting in paragraph 7, I think. All right. Does that answer your question, Nechama? And anybody else who had that question?
Yes, I think that was very clear.
Okay, great. All right. So let's take a look. Yoni, I see that you've joined us. Don't be intimidated. I invited people to come back in because we're starting really to we're starting the process of doing Iyun into Elokus. Up until now, paragraph 5, even paragraph 6, it's kind of an introduction, and then he's going to take us into this realm of doing Iyun, into like how Hashem enlivens the world, how his energy does that. Exactly your question, Nachama. How do I think about that? And he's going to show us. All right. So, Mira, do you want to put everybody into groups of two, maybe like, how many people want to? We have 8 people. I'm going to stop the recording.
How was it?
Okay, just give us some feedback how that worked for you. Did you have enough time? Let me see. Alkalea, do you want to talk to us? Just give us some feedback. You're muted though. You're muted.
Me.
Oh, okay. So I think I frustrated poor Saratova by my broken up reading in Hebrew. And anyway, whatever. Okay, so wait, what should I tell you? I mean, I ended up reading mostly of the English, so you can ask them what they thought about. They seem to be okay that we got to some understanding of what the paragraph is talking about.
Okay, good. So that's, that's the main thing, is just to read it over and get an understanding of, of the pshat, of what it's talking about. So,
Right.
So did anybody come up with three or four, like 3 lines of what the paragraph was about, so that we can just write it into this document that we have? Let me just, okay. So,
Yeah, that's what I asked Miriam if she.
so can somebody write into the chat what you came up with? Saratova, you did it last time, you and Nechama. Do you want to give us what you came up with? Or Miriam? Just write it into the chat. Let me see it. Just let me know that somebody's following my request here, so we're not just sitting and waiting. Maybe I should just pause the recording while we do this. Okay.
Okay.
I forgot to turn the recording on again.
So that's the difference, right? So on Orach level, it's general understanding. On Rochav level is detailed understanding. Okay, so the many mashalim needed for different purposes. On Orach level, it's needed to kirve laseichel, to bring it close to my brain. On a Rochav level, to study them in depth so we understand the qualitative difference between each one of them. In which way they are similar, in which way they are different, and which of the aspects I'm going to take towards creating my nimshal, understanding of the nimshal. Okay, so that's the difference. This is mainly, the summary of the chapter 5 is the difference between orach and rochav of this Memalei Kol Almin, and what each one of these add to each other. Yeah, is that provide some clarity?
So Nechama is asking on the chat, do you think that rochav takes us to a different part of the brain?
It brings it deeper, because in order to do an analysis, we're going deeper. It's no longer, just, the outer layers of the brain. We need to bring in more of the, frontal cortex, I guess, right? That's where all the, the eon, where it takes place is like, how are they similar? How are they different? All the logic behind it.
It definitely uses a different part of the brain. The brain functions in a different way in orach and rochav and oimek.
And it's much slower. It's much slower. That's when we slow down. We don't just read. That's where we pay attention to every word.
Yeah.
Okay. The first is that us getting familiar. For example, I am reading a book. I usually read books twice. One is just that I could get a general skim of it. Okay. And make a decision whether this book is really requires, whether it's good enough to really go deeper into it, because you can't really know. You're starting reading a book, and actually happened to me many times where I fully exerted my mind over the book, and then I just left like, oh my gosh, I wasted my time. I didn't like the end of it. So we do that all the time. We just go and we study something in a very superficial way so we could get an idea what this is about. And after we do that, then we spend many hours studying it and really, thinking like, oh, this is what I want to do.
In a sense, when we're asking you to create a summary, we're asking you to not, it's really you're dealing with the orach initially. You're just trying to understand the pshat. And when you make a summary, you probably start to feel like your brain has to work a little bit harder. You're starting to edge away from the orach into rochav. It's not necessarily rochav itself, but it's making you think differently. You have to really think, well, what did I really learn? And then you go back over it and go deeper. So
right. So now this is mainly the rochav is a very intellectual part. And that's where many people get stuck. We feel like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be an intellectual. I want to come right away into sensing. But it can't. We cannot come into sensing elokus in a tangible way if we don't go through this step. Yeah, and that's like a big debate where our brain keeps part. Meaning we could, that's where we're going into contrastes spilos, pretty much, right? The discussion is there. But we could, but that's not going to be in a tangible way. It's going to be like, once in the blue moon, when my Yechuda reveals itself, I have some senses of Hashem. But if we want to create a true keli that could hold on, this is where the kelim are being created. Kelim are being created through breaking of our brain, because the breaking of the brain happens in rochav. I have to draw a diagram of every single mashal in our context right now, right? We're going to be working with 4 mashalim, and we need to compare and contrast. That's, in a way, it's like a heavy intellectual thing to do, right? We need to, compare, hear what he has to say about mashal of the sun and the ray of the sun, then about, the light of the candle. How are they similar? How are they different? Why we need both of them to explain the light of Hashem. Then we're going to take the mashal of how the soul enlivens the body. It's a beautiful part. It's very, very amazing. And then we're also going to see the limitations of this mashal and how each one of them, are similar and a contrast and tata'a, and then a koach ha-poel benifal, right, is the power of the activator into activated being. And it's in itself, it's like a whole new dimension. And we're going to be learning. And in a way, we might think like, oh my gosh, why do I need to do that? But by doing this eon, what we're going to do is we're going to build an infrastructure in our brain that could hold on to this light in a conscious way, in a conscious way. And this is the key word, because we all subconsciously connected with Hashem, essence to essence. Wait, what? So then you're like, what are you talking about? I still feel tired. I feel unmotivated. I don't feel God. And all these beautiful things happens to us because we're not consciously aware of this connection. And in order for us to be consciously aware of this connection, we need to create a keli. Okay, and that keli is created through iyun, and that's where iyun takes place. Iyun takes place on the level of rochav. Okay, that's where and then what happens then? Then we have this empty box here, which is for our omek. Omek is that when we start sensing elokus already. Okay, but that happens after the intellectual analysis, because the goal is not for our nefesh elokis to know God. There's no goal like that. She knows God even without going through all this. Okay, so it's for our nefesh Bahamas, who we mainly deal with, because we are neshamas beguf. Hashem created our bodies in a certain way. And this is the pathway that our Rebbeim carved in, so we could have long, short way. What's the whole analogy of a long, short way? It's long because we need to do the work, but it's short because it provides us certain results. Okay? It's not some kind of, me coming over to you and inspiring you with some mystical ideas and you feeling like, oh my gosh, and then the minute Memalei is out of the window, the whole feeling is out of the window. No, that's not the goal. The goal is that every single chassid will find and create their own path, their own understanding, and their own personal experience with Hashem. And that could be done through our sanctuary, which is our Chabad. Okay, Kodesh HaKadoshim, right? Kodesh and Kodesh HaKadoshim, this is the sanctuary, which is the level of Chabad. And this is what our Rebbeim established, that this is what we're going to reveal to masses. So they could have Gilu Elokus B'tmidus on a constant level that's going to be accessible to them without us being dependent on the Rebbe. So our relationship with the Rebbe changes. Then Chagat, I see that some of the Cham, I think, brings it. Exactly. This is the big debate between Chabad and Chagat, because in Chagat, you are stuck to the shorish of your neshama. That's it. There's no pathway out. You constantly have to be connected with the Rebbe. Well, in Chabad, we're also connected with the Rebbe, but it's a different relationship. Okay, and we are connected with the Rebbe as a guidance, not as something that does work for us. Okay, and that's something the Rebbe very clearly established in first Maimer Basilagani that the Rebbe said. Okay, so he wants us to do the work. Why? He wants us to work hard? No, he wants us to have a true gilui. That's a true Avas Yisrael. A true Avas Yisrael is that my student will have a path, a clear path, accessing his own chushim, okay, so and have his own relationship with Hashem, because that's the ultimate goal of Mashiach. That we're not going to be learning from people. We're going to be having a straight path of learning, and connecting to Hashem through different channels. Okay, so that's the ultimate goal. And I think we need to go already. It's 11:15, beginning of chapter. We're going to go right here, right? So we are here by paragraph 6, and in paragraph 6 we're going to be doing something interesting. Okay, so let's see where paragraph 6 is going to bring us. You see my paragraph 6, yeah, on the screen?
Yeah. Do you want to close your tabs, the document tabs, and we'll make it bigger?
Oh yeah, like this. Paragraph 6. Okay, maybe I could even make it a little bit bigger. So now, V'hina lahavin inyan zehetiv. Okay, hina yedua, right? And behold, to understand this matter, it is known that the aspect of how Hashem's unity, right, the divine light with the worlds, generally in two modes. Okay, Hashem has two modes of how he interacts with the worlds. And it's very, very essential to know it, because it literally will change how you think about godliness, right? Because you see, we tend to think that there's one way, but there's not one way. There's many ways. There's many paradigms and there's many awarenesses, okay? And once we start understanding, it's liberating to know that we are not stuck, okay? And there are two ways how Hashem interacts with the world. We already learned that there are two types of worlds. They are, right? There's Atzilus, and then there's Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And how Hashem interacts and reveals himself in these worlds is qualitatively different, right? Meaning how the creation sees Hashem and accesses Hashem in a Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya is different than how emanated beings, right, in the world of Atzilus accessing godliness is very different, okay? And since we have all of this world structures within us, we also have two different pathways of how we access godliness, okay? Now, what is it? What are generally these two ways? Namely, this is in a manner of essence and the extension. This is Etzem v'Ispashtus, and in a way of concealment and revelation. So these are the two, I could call it, paradigms. Okay, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya interact with God through Etzem v'Ispashtus, that is essence, and then there is an extension of the essence. And in the world of Atzilus, they interact through revelation and concealment, hell and begilui. And now, how are they different? We're gonna study B'ezrat Hashem as we move along. And most importantly, v'shneim amitim, both of them are true. Okay. For the unity of the essence and emanator, right, with the emanated beings, is in the matter of concealment and revelation. Meaning, in the world of Atzilus, it's Halam v'Gilui. Ach bechinas hamshachas hashefa mebechinas or en sof. Hamalubish bebechinas kelim da Atzilus lis yachid ben Yivraim. However, the aspect of drawing down of the flow from or en sof, which is enclosed in the vessels of Atzilus, right? There's a world of Atzilus, and through the vessels of the Atzilus, the world of Bria, and so on and so forth, created. Okay, that is done. That is done in a manner of essence and extension. Okay, okay. We just need to take it as a fact, because unless you had prior knowledge to it, there's nothing we could add. That's just what it is. Okay. In short, Atzilus deals with godliness through Helam v'Gilui, and Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya through Etzem v'Ispashtus. Okay, and one becomes the layer over the other. What do I mean? Imagine Atzilus is the core of creation. Okay, and Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya are the layers around it. Don't look in a linear way. Okay, just take your line and turn it like that, inward. Okay, so in the Pnimius, that's what become Atzilus, and the more Chitzonius will become Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Right? So in the Pnimius, the world, okay, interacts with Hashem through Helam v'Gilui, and in the Chitzonius, it interacts through Etzem v'Ispashtus. Okay? Meaning,
sorry,
yeah.
does it make sense at this point to try and explain what those two things mean? Or is he just...
He's going to give beautiful explanations in the next paragraph.
Okay.
So,
All
yeah.
right. So let's
Without Hashem, yeah.
So
So,
this is an example of derech klal. He's just introducing us to the concept and not explaining it. Almost like
exactly.
take
Yeah,
the...
he's just telling us there is such a concept.
Right.
Imagine somebody, your first time you went to the math class, they said, we're going to learn about addition and subtraction. And you have no idea what addition means, and you have no idea what subtraction means. You just need to remember the terminology. That's it.
Okay, good.
There is an addition and there is a subtraction. Next class, we're going to learn about what they actually mean. Okay, so that's what he's doing to us, right? He's bringing us these two ideas, two klalim, two rules in a way, okay, of how things work. One is Etzem v'Ispashtus, and one is Helen v'Gilui. And in which world we have what type of interactions. Basically, that's all what we need to know at this point. Okay. Okay, and this is all this idea. He says, in detail, you could see Kamavor Besidur Mamar Zecher Av Tuvcha, Yon Sham, right? As explained in the Siddur, etc. Okay. Now, since obviously we understood that since we are working mainly Bria down, we're not touching Atzilus yet. Anybody knows why we're not touching Atzilus? Because Atzilus is Yechuda Ila'a. Okay, we're not touching that yet. Okay, we're first getting our brain used to known, and known for us is anything from Bria down. So since the Bria down is Yechuda tata'a, okay, and since we just learned that the world interacts with Hashem through a paradigm which is called Etzem v'Ispashtus, right? There's an essence, and then there's an extension of the essence. Okay. So since this is what we are dealing with, we're going to be dealing with that, and from that we learn four mashalim, right? There are four mashalim. What are these mashalim? Okay, Aleph, the first one is mashal de ziv hashemesh hamir laaretz. One is the ray of the sun illuminating the world. Okay, there's a sun, which is the Etzem, and then there's a hispashtus, which is the ray of the sun. Okay. So from this, we will, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to go into detail into this analogy. But right now, we just need to know about the sun and the ray of the sun. Now, habeis meir haner hamir babais, right? The second analogy of the light of a candle that illuminates the house. Okay. So that's a second mashal. Now, obviously, you're going to ask a question, why first mashal wasn't good enough? It seems to be the same thing, right? There's a candle, and the candle illuminates. We don't need two mashalim for this. It's the same idea. There's a source of light, and then how the light diffuses into the space. Again, just hold on that question. It's an excellent question that's going to answer a little bit later on. Okay, so why we need two luminaries. One is the sun and one is the candle. Okay, but anyway, anyhow, this is a second mashal. Now, the third mashal, it's a little complicated, right? It's unobservable in a certain sense. The third mashal is chayut hanefesh beguf, right? The life force of our soul in our body. We obviously experience it firsthand. That's how I can talk, and that's why I'm still warm, and that's why the blood is flowing through my blood vessels. It's a very personal experience. Anybody who sits in this Zoom room, all the 13 people here, experience this firsthand. They may not have sun shining on them, and they may not have candles shining on them, but they definitely experience the life force of the soul in the body. Okay? And despite the sophisticated machinery out there in hospitals, people still die. Why? Because what truly gives life to a human being is the soul. The neshama gives life to the soul, enlivens. I'm sorry, the soul enlivens the body. Okay, and this is the third mashal. Okay, it also works in Etzem v'Ispashtus. Okay, Hadalet mikoach ha-poel v'nif'al. The third one, the fourth one, it's a little bit interesting, which brought down in Chassidus many times. This is the power of activator in activated being. What that means, we don't know yet. He didn't tell us examples. What does that mean? But these are the four mashalim. Okay, very easy. Sun, candle, body and soul, and activator into activated being.
Mila,
Now what?
Sorry, just one question. Could you say that these are four mashalim for the Memalei line?
Yes, Memalei for sure. Okay. So this is what it is. It's Memalei, Yechuda tata'a.
It's all the same.
Bria, Etzem v'Ispashtus. These are all similar, not similar. They are the same concept of the same thing. Okay. Umikulam yachad. Umikulam yachad. Yuvan omek inyan hayichud. Okay, and from all of them together, one may understand the depth of the unity, the Or and Sof, Balamot and Yivraim. Just in case if you were wondering what happened to the Omega Musag, remember? In our Canva presentation right here, right? You see this Omega Musag was empty, right? It's through the study of Rochav, we're going to come into the depth of understanding, is when we're going to put all the mashalim together and we're going to really, really go into comparing and contrasting between each mashalim. Then the nimshal would start shining. So once we're going to have this aha moment into the nimshal, we know that we have the depth. We know that we have omek hamusag. Okay, omek inyan hayichud, we're able to understand the depth of the unity of the Or and Sof with the created worlds. Okay, meaning we will understand this interaction of Etzem and his pashtos, that Hashem is the essence and we are the extensions. Okay, so this is what we'll understand. What is he going to do with the world? Lahachayoisam, lahavois mi'ain liyesh, to give them life and bring them into being from ayin into yesh. Okay, so that's more or less, he finishes the idea that, hey guys, we're just going to explain you that there are two ways how Hashem interacts. In Atzilus, it's Halam v'Gilui. In Bria, it's Etzem v'Ispashtus. And in this Etzem v'Ispashtus, to understand this whole concept of Etzem v'Ispashtus, we're going to give you four mashalim. So now what is he adding? It looks very similar to before. Before, he also promised us four mashalim. Remember? When he was discussing about Yechuda tata'a. But over there, we didn't have the whole concept of Etzem v'Ispashtus. So the mashal would not serve us properly because we don't know what we need to conclude into. Concluding, understanding what? Here, we're concluding to understand after four mashalim. Okay, we're concluding to understand after four mashalim how Etzem v'Ispashtus works. We need to understand the mechanism of how Etzem v'Ispashtus works. Once we will understand the mechanism of Etzem v'Ispashtus, we will click to understand how Hashem interacts in a paradigm called Memalei Kol Almin. Okay, we will understand the system, how system works in Etzem v'Ispashtus, in Memalei. Once we click there, now we are ready to understand how Halam v'Gilui works. Meaning Yechuda Ila'a. Yechuda Ila'a is like Halam v'Gilui. Okay, so slowly we're going to build on it. And then later on, we will understand how we don't even need to have Yechuda Ila'a. You understand? Yeah, is that clear? How we're going in a very predictable and in a way, systematic way, and not just throwing random ideas, okay? So that's very essential because different ma'amarim that we're going to be learning later on, okay, different ma'amarim that we're going to be learning later on are going to be explaining to us different aspects. So all of a sudden, you're creating a structure that when you're going to be learning a particular concept, you will know which content to put that in. You will say like, oh, that's how Etzem v'Hispashtus works. Or you could say, oh, this mimer is talking about hell and Vigilui, how it works. Yeah, so you're creating this broad map and you start understanding how every detail works. For example, now I could tell you, okay, we are studying this mashalim in great detail, and in your mind, you're going to click, oh, that's Rachav of Bina. Right? Or when I'm going to say now, we're just going to get general glimpse of the concept, and in your mind, you could be like, oh, that's Orach of Bina. So you're becoming familiar with terminology and the functions of the pnimius koachos that we already have. Okay? So now we're going to go into a new idea, and we're going to be now bothered to understand different questions that philosophers had. Because you see, philosophers, who are we referring to? These are Greek philosophers, okay? They tried to understand how Hashem creates the world. And in their quest to understand how Hashem creates the world based on Jewish sources, they came to difficulties. That's why they couldn't come to the same conclusions as they are described in Kabbalah. Okay, they had difficulties. They were like, oh, what's going on? It doesn't make sense. Okay, and we're going to understand what were their difficulties, why they had such difficulties altogether. Because the apparatus, right, of how they were thinking, what they were basing, what is the basic premise of the thinking patterns, what exactly they were basing it off. That was something wrong at the core of how they were thinking. Okay, so let's see from the text exactly what issues they had. Now, how does that exactly help us to understand these mashalim? Okay. Now, keep it in mind. This is going to be my question to you. This is going to be my little test, so I can understand that you're following what I'm saying here. Okay. So this is going to be the question. Okay. Now, I'm going to be reading something. Okay, reading this end of this paragraph. Okay, the story with philosophers, and your job is going to be to tell us in the end, how does that relate to our discussion about this whole Memalei Kol Almin, Etzem v'Hispashtus, hell and Vigilui? How is that going to help us with mashalim? Basically, questioning why Reb Hillel giving this to us. How is it assisting us? Okay, so that's going to be your question. So turn on the volumes of your brains to maximum so we could move on. Okay, I've been like moving. Okay. When we call, okay, v'lahavin kol hanal yesh lahagdim kushiyas apilosofim. And to understand all the above, one must first preface with a question raised by the philosophers. What are they? What the issue is? Okay, I'm kind of like losing my space when I move it. Okay. Okay. Be'ichud hishavus kol hanivroim mi'oto yisbarach. Okay, they had questions concerning the matter which all created beings come into existence from Hashem, blessed he be. Ehu mechaye oisam gam le'achari savusam. So the question was how he continues to enliven them even after their creation. Will be frat, and specifically, they had mainly raised two questions. The philosophers raised two questions. By the way, Alter Rebbe also discusses this in Tanya. Ha-aleph. The first one is, how can something limited be created from something unlimited? For the activated resembles the activator. This was the first question. Okay. The ha-poel, and the second one, she'im kain, that if so, yishtane chas v'shalom mikodem ha-bria le'achar bria. That if so, that if Hashem creates, right, similar to him, okay. So the second question is raising, if so, God would, heaven forbid, change from before the creation to after creation. There will be a change in God. Ki kodem ha-bria haya levadei. For before the creation, he was alone. V'achshav achar ha-bria nitasvu hanivraim. And after the creation, we already added, meaning we exist, right? This is the premise, right? We exist. And if we exist, okay, so it means there's a change in Hashem. It's a very legit question, by the way, if you think, right? So that means if Hashem is alone, how can you say that he didn't change? Well, who are we? We exist or we don't exist? So he's no longer alone, mamash, like it was before the creation. And if so, originally he was not enclosed into anything, right? He was all by himself. So now he's enclosed in creation. And now he's created, okay, he's enclosed within the created beings in order to give them life. So he's busy with something right now. So how could you say that he's alone? And that indicates that there was some kind of change in Hashem. Okay. Okay. So now, these difficulties, okay, compelled them to believe that the flow of life from Hashem to the world, okay, passes through intermediaries. Okay, there is something in between Hashem and creation, and that's why in Greek mythology they are god of this and god of that, right? Why? Because they couldn't understand how can Hashem create the world in such a way, and therefore there must be something in between. There must be an independent power that receives from Hashem, okay? And then it takes over from now on, and now that power is creating, sustaining. Therefore, there's a God of fire, and then there's a God of love, and then there's a God of good digestion, and so on and so forth. Okay, so therefore, that just, that made sense to them, okay? That's what led them to idolatry, basically.
Mila, how would having an intermediary solve those two problems?
Yeah, because Hashem is not directly involved. He, in a way, creates an energy of fire, and he gives it over to Gabriel. And now Gabriel is this created, so-called half God, half created being, okay? And he passes it on and creates things. So now God is free. He allocated. You understand? He's a good manager. He allocated his powers to all the malachim, okay? And now could go drink coffee. He's just going to come once a month to check the bills, to check, balance sheets. Okay, what happened, what didn't happen. You understand? So it's not really involved. It's like this big CEO sits in his office on a computer doing nothing. Okay, so he's not directly involved. I understand that it doesn't make sense because you know the true way. But if you wouldn't know the true way, it would make perfect sense to you. Because we're accessing from a very restrictive mindset that these philosophers had. But, once you taste from Ilana de Chai, you understand, you automatically can't even understand how they've been thinking like that. But listen, people thought that the earth was flat. Come on. I mean, now we'll look at it like, no, it's not. But people really, for many centuries, believed that that's what it was. So it's, how can we,
I mean, I guess my question, I don't want to go, make too much of a point. We should go forward. But if Hashem created intermediaries, he's still not alone. Like it doesn't really.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't answer fully, but it made them feel, I guess, a little bit better. I don't know. Like,
it doesn't fully, I don't feel that it fully.
But that's why they believed that Hashem, there was a change in Hashem. They believe in that. We don't believe in that. But some people, the philosophers still believe that. This is why it made them believe that Hashem is more of a finite power than infinite. Now exactly the opposite happens. With all the quantum physics showing up, they're showing the unlimitedness of the limited beings. We're going the other way. But they questioned Hashem's being unlimited because they, mainly dealt with Newtonian physics, right, which is matter versus matter. And now they're going, there's been a huge reform in science. But back then, when, with whatever tools they had, this is, they couldn't understand. Okay. Asher elo hakushiyos hechricham la'amin hashpat hachayut derech memutzayim. Right, that these questions compel them to believe that the flow of life must pass through intermediaries. But the eyes are dimmed from seeing for their eyes of flesh. Right, meaning they're looking at the creation from a finite perspective. So they're looking at how things are, only what the eyes see. They don't see anything beyond that, right? So therefore, they had a very, very big limitations. For they compare the act of Holy One, blessed be He, to the act of man. Okay, so this is the main problem. The main problem, how they come to these conclusions, is they compare our actions, the finite actions, into the actions of Hashem. Okay, and they compare. So meaning like this is the main flaw in the premise of thinking. So obviously the conclusions are going to be full of problems because that's how they begin to look at it. Okay, why? What's the problem? Because the human being operates kol pulosov umasov hema miyesh liyesh. Human beings whose every action and deed is miyesh liyesh. We don't create anything from nothing. We don't even know what nothing means. Consciously, anybody knows what nothing means? No. We mainly operate yesh miyesh. Aval ma'aseh HaKadosh Baruch Hu mi'ayin liyesh. But the act of God is mi'ayin liyesh. ולכן גם שבבחינת Memalei Kol Almin נקרא בשם Koach ha-poel b'nif'al. Therefore, even though the level of Memalei Kol Almin is called the power of activator, it's activated being, right? Which is Koach ha-poel b'nif'al. Shezeu b'chinas Shem Adonai or Shem Elokim, which corresponds to the divine names of Adonai or Elokim. Nevertheless, it is not similar to the power of the activator, Koach ha-poel, that exists down below in a man. And as we said, that for a man, the drawing forth of the action from potential to an effect, it comes from yesh liyesh. Okay. But in elokus, in godliness, right? The drawing forth of action from the divine light is from ayin liyesh. As we will explain later. That's the famous quote. We will explain everything later. Okay, cool. Now, what's the story with philosophers? Asking this question again. Okay, now we just read as philosophers had some problems in their thinking. Okay, we all have a philosopher within us, right, who thinks this way. So what are we going to tell to our philosopher, right? Why it's so important to understand that philosopher. Okay, who cares what my philosopher thinks? How does that relate to this form of shalom? Can anybody get an understanding? Why I need to understand my philosopher before I understand this form of shalom? Come on, no wrong answers. I even will ask Naria to turn off the recording. If somebody is so self-conscious.
I mean,
thought you-
doesn't it show us clearly what is not? I mean, what is? I mean, because we already know that what they what their theory was not correct.
Fine. So why we need to know this? Seriously, like, yeah. What's his name? Rabbi Hillel had just stopped and said, okay, I'm finally getting to this form of shalom, but you know what? Before I understand this form of shalom fully, I have to tell you what philosopher says. Who cares what they say? Like, why do you think this piece of information was important for us to know before we're finally going to get into this form of shalom? Like, hello.
I mean, doesn't it put a dagesh on what we do know?
Fine, you do, but
Like,
why do we need to know this piece of information? Like, what does it add? What this piece that philosophers believe in Koach v'Koach, and how does it going to help us to understand this form of shalom? There's not right or wrong answers. What does it just say? Anything that comes into your mind, just pop in. Don't filter. Because now you're subconscious. Once you start filtering, that's your conscious mind that at this point knows nothing. What? Let your subconscious talk. Just talk.
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm driving, but
Yeah, go ahead.
you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm thinking that, like you said, we have that philosopher in us. It's part of this world, so we always have to answer that. I mean, what comes to mind is I visited my daughter when she was living in Hawaii a long time ago, and being there in that environment, I could understand their avodah zarah. I mean, they were between the volcanoes and the sea, and it was for survival. So I don't think that believing in God of this and God of that, and we have that in our culture. We believe we're in the God of technology, so we're surrounded by that kind of thinking. So we have to constantly be on guard and answer that question.
Okay, good. Great. We're getting there. Let's go. Anybody else wants to share?
I don't know if you can hear me properly.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, so it's a similar thing, but it's how we different to Hashem, because we keep on thinking the way Hashem creates is the way we create, and we just have to remind ourselves the same.
Okay, great. It's interesting. Yes, Miriam, go ahead.
You're muted, Miriam.
You're muted.
Miriam, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. No, I just have a problem with the concept of nothing, of coming from nothing. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing, I mean, you asked just what pops up, that the intermediaries are, we do believe that they are, channels through which we perceive godliness. And I find it quite difficult to really conceptualize everything being like from one source. So that's just my questioning.
That's great, because he actually touches on this very interesting thing about the philosopher within us, right? That we perceive the world through Yesh. This is the core problem that they have, right? I'm Yesh, therefore Hashem Yesh. Remember, the first question is like, how can finite be created from infinite, right? So now Chassidus shatters that even more. Chassidus says Hashem is not, it's higher than infinite. We don't even know what Hashem is, right? So now the key point here is what he does. He expands our mind by asking those questions of philosophers, which truly every single one of us asks these questions, right? And the answers are going to be very, very long. But he puts it out there so we know what difficulties. He's laying the difficulties before the answers. And he's going to bring this up. He's going to say, oh, you know, Hashem didn't change. That's one of the core beliefs, right? Hashem says, Ani havaya lo shinisi. I did not change. How in the world you can create the world, okay, with such great details? We don't even know all of the creation. I mean, come on, just go study flowers. Go study animals. You'll be like blown away with the amount. People is still to discover what type of animals, what type of fish and all this. It's in abundance and in such a creative ways. And you're going to say that you didn't change? Like, what's going on here, right? So our goal is truly to demystify. But what's beautiful about it is that it takes away this whole avodah zarah perception that there are intermediaries. Okay? So it really puts... This is the beauty. By the way, Hashem could have created a different world. Hashem could have created the world with intermediaries, but he chose not to. And there was nothing in the ways of Hashem. So by his chesed, right, Hashem said, no, my essence is creating everything. Okay? But I'm going to create this illusion. Okay? And your job is to uncover that illusion. Okay? So what he is now bringing into this whole thing about, the sun and the candle and, how the soul enlivens the body and the Koach, ha-poel beneath all this form of shalom, and says, you know what, stop for a second. You should know that there is a philosopher in you, okay, that has these interesting questions. Okay. And this is the problem thinking. The problem thinking is they thinking that because they are miyesh leyesh, therefore everything is miyesh leyesh. Even Hashem creates miyesh leyesh. And all of a sudden he brings into this concept of ayin, right? And everybody's like blown away. What is ayin? Right? We don't even know what that is. And this is the savor. Because of this ayin, okay, we are no longer subject to the limitation. We are no longer confined to our circumstances. Okay, we could always go into ayin and draw a new yesh. So once we start thinking about it, we start thinking in a Jewish way. This is a Jewish way of thinking. The rest is a Goyish way of thinking. Okay, the Goyish way of thinking is mi yesh leyesh. And that's not what we want to think about. So he's expanding our cognitive skills to believe, you know what, there's ayin out there. And it's interestingly, now our Goyim finally catching up into an idea of infinite field. Right? Everybody talks about this whole quantum physics. There's a field, quantum field, it's when you are nothing, nobody, all that thing, right? And everything comes from it. Right? But that's like a whole evolvement of science coming from Greek, philosophers, all the way down to our quantum physics, and we see a huge shift with Einstein in his whole theory of relativity and quantum physics streaming from it. Okay, where we see a huge shift in how Goyim thinking. It's unbelievable, right? Because we see that the times of Mashiach is here, right? That even all the nations, this is all prophecy of Avadia, right? About whose wife we've been reading in this past Haftarah, right? Yesterday's Haftarah was the wife of Avadia, the first portion, where her two sons were supposed to be sold, for the money that he owed, and the whole thing with oil, right? The miracle with oil and Elisha. So she was the wife of Avadia, okay? How did he acquire his debt? It was by 100 Nevi'im that he sustained when the Queen Isabel was persecuting Nevi'im. Remember that story from Novi? And he hid 100 Nevi'im in 2 caves, 50-50. And he took a lot of money from the king to sustain them with light and bread and water. So when he passed away, they came to claim the debt and whatever. It's a whole story on its own. But so the prophecy of Avadia, it's a very short prophecy. I believe it's like 27 psukim. About the downfall. Avadia was a ger. He was from Edom. And he prophesizes about the downfall of the nations in the times of Mashiach. So what's the point? So we see that, what do you mean downfall of the nations? The nations will be transformed, right? Besides Amalek. Amalek is the only nation that's not going to be transformed. So all other 7 nations, they're going to be transformed. And meaning 7, times 10, 70 is, primarily because the thinking will change. And we see with the revelation of quantum physics that the core thinking is changing. Now they came up, a few years ago about the string theory, and it's amazing. If you read about it, the research about it is like, it's like, wow, they literally believe in unified godly energy that creates all of being. You know what I mean? Like an unlimited. This is unlimited, godly energy. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. Anyway, we're a little bit sidetracking, but not really sidetracking, because we see that even from the times of Rabbi Hillel, there's a huge shift. We're talking about 200 years ago when Rabbi Hillel lived, right? There's a huge shift in the world of science, philosophers, right? In the world of philosophers. So the philosopher is being elevated. Right. So until that, this is a very important point to keep in mind, that, we need to know what to answer to Epicurus, right? This is like one of the Dama of Epicurus, and this is what we're doing, right? We need to know what are the questions that might arise down the line as we're going to be studying about these 4 mashalim. So we know the flaw in thinking. So we could, kind of, have our guards on. If this type of thoughts come up, we know where the issue is, that we're thinking yesh liyesh and not ein liyesh. Now, the whole concept of bitachon is this problem. Can Hashem rescue me? If we believe in yesh miyesh, then there are limitations. Hashem is limited. He can rescue you. You got yourself into so much problems, right? I guess for us, my prosperity in Mandami, 4 years of, leadership in New York, what's going to happen? Okay, is Hashem is limited. Are we going to have a catastrophe in New York, Fasul Shalom? Are we going to, be prosperous more than ever before with Mandami? Because Hashem is Kaviyachol, right? We could have the worst mayor in the world with very creepy ideas, and lo and behold, we're going to see a tikkun of Ishmael, right then and there. So it's like limitations of our thinking, right? So if we think from yesh miyesh, we're going to be like, oh my gosh, Mandami is, the mayor. I'm buying a ticket to Israel. It's going to be a disaster here.
Yes. Come to Israel.
Okay. Or I could say, I'm going to be wherever I will be, wherever Hashem wants me to be, and it's going to be the best of my years, like Yaakov Avinu's best years when Mitzrayim. Okay. So that's, that's where we put the limit in the thinking, and it's all evolves in this, questions of the philosophers. Am I thinking like a philosopher? I'm thinking like a Jew.
So, Mila, we kind of at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one other thing which came to my mind, which is that it seems to me that 3 of the 4 mashalim are mashalim of yesh to yesh. So how would he be able to explain to us an ayin with a mashal that...
All of them are yesh to yesh, actually.
What?
I mean, the fourth one, it's like,
Yes.
the fourth one, I'll tell you, like, we just need to, I don't know, pray so we can understand.
Because it's closer to I try to understand ayin, as Miriam says, like, we live in a world of yesh. How do we understand ayin? And
He'll explain beautifully. He'll explain unbelievably. Yeah. The sun and the ray of the sun, because he's unbelievable. Okay, just to give you a glimpse, he's going to explain something phenomenal. He's going to explain how in the sun ray, there's 2 aspects. There is what sun shines, that's called Or Hashemish, and then there's a Ziv Hashemish, how the light of the sun is perceived. Okay, very philosophical, right? But let's imagine the sun shines the light. Okay, it shines to every place. But imagine Mila's windows are going to be red, and Maria's windows are going to be green. I'm going to see the light of Hashem as a red light, and Neri is going to see as a green light, right? But Hashem shines, but the sun shines the same light. Okay, and we all going to scream and argue. Neria will say Hashem's light is green, and I'm going to say Hashem's light is red. And Neria is going to bring her evidence and send us pictures how through her windows it's red. And I'm going to bring green, and I'm going to bring my evidence that they are, red. But you know what? They're none of it. We both have a mistake. It's through which kalim. The kalim determined what type of light is going to come through. Okay, so that's how he's going to slowly, this is just one, I'm giving you like a little taste. So he's going to slowly expand our thinking into this mashalim and understand how Hashem's light is unlimited even through physical mashalim.
Okay, good. Yeah. Looking
forward.
See you guys.
Okay, thank you, and B'ezrat Hashem. Much hatzlacha. I would say cook these ideas in your head for a week. Just, start thinking, catch yourself where you're thinking as a philosopher. He just shared with you, a few glimpses. Okay, beautiful. Much hatzlacha. If any questions, you could put them in the chat. Otherwise,